this ingredient is banned in many countries. It is labeled in tricky ways in other countries to still sneak in your food every day, and it is killing people. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Ryan. I'm a full-time PA, physician assistant, and a working mom, and today we're uncovering the truth about trans fats. We're going to talk about what it is, where it hides, and how to protect you and your family from it. So let's dive in. First, trans fats, otherwise called trans fatty acids, are, as you could guess, a type of fat. However, these are man-made, so they are not found naturally, with one exception, which we'll get to in a little bit. Trans fats are made in a factory by taking a liquid vegetable oil, adding hydrogen to it to replace some of those double bonds in that fatty acid, turning it into a solid form of fat. When adding this type of fat, trans fats, to food, it makes that food last longer on the shelf, i.e. making the company more money. It is very cheap to make this type of fat, and their products last longer without going bad. They're also added to food to help improve the texture and the taste of those manufactured foods. So it is more pleasurable, more addicting to the human brain. Again, makes the company more money. Now, I will say, coming back to what I said earlier, trans fat does occur naturally in some foods. You can find small amounts of trans fats naturally in meats and dairy products primarily, but that is not the primary concern for trans fats. The bigger concern are these trans fats that are made in a factory, manufactured, and added to processed food. That is the most harmful type of trans fats and what we need to avoid. The problem with these types of trans fats is our body doesn't recognize it. So our body doesn't know how to process or break that down. And the results are deadly, even in small quantities of trans fats. Trans fats has a huge negative effect on our cholesterol. They increase our bad type of cholesterol, that low density lipoprotein or LDL, and then they also work to decrease our good cholesterol, or HDL, or high density lipoprotein. How I remember those two, just a little side note, is low density lipoprotein, the LDL, low. You want that low. That's not the good kind. And then HDL, or high density lipoprotein, high. You want that higher. HDL is our good cholesterol. Of course, with unhealthy cholesterol levels, that increases our risk for heart disease, strokes, heart attacks. Trans fat has actually been more recently associated with just an overall increased risk for all-cause mortality. In fact, trans fat is so dangerous, the World Health Organization had called for an elimination of trans fat around the world by 2023 because of how dangerous they are. But I'm able to still walk in my local grocery store and find these on the shelves. The FDA in the United States did ban added artificially made trans fats in commercially produced foods, but there are, of course, ways around this. So the biggest thing to do, how to know if your foods contain trans fat, is what you want to look for on the ingredient list is the words partially hydrogenated oils. The front of the package, even if it says 0 grams trans fat per serving, even if the nutrition label says 0 grams of trans fat, that doesn't mean that it's not in there. You want to scour the ingredient list looking for the words partially and hydrogenated are what you want to avoid in the ingredients list. If a manufactured food has less than half a gram of trans fat per serving, that company can round that down to 0 grams of trans fat on the label and say that is 0 grams of trans fat. Since the FDA ban, part of my confusion lies in now labeling ingredients just as hydrogenated oils. There is no requirement that they have to say partially or fully hydrogenated oils, so we don't know as consumers. Since this FDA ban in the United States, I have honestly seen a decreased use of partially hydrogenated oils in foods. I'm finding it less commonly in foods in the grocery store, which is wonderful. However, I will say there has been an increase in fully hydrogenated fats in foods to replace that partially hydrogenated fats. Fully hydrogenated fats is made by the same process. Instead of some of the double bonds being replaced by hydrogen in that fatty acid, they're all replaced fully hydrogenated bonds. Our body, from what I understand, does not think of the fully hydrogenated fats as trans fats. However, they're more considered like a saturated fat, from what I understand right now at this time, which saturated fats are also not good for our health in general. We want to be eating and looking for unsaturated fats to make up the majority of the fat that we consume in our everyday diet. Also, the fully hydrogenated fats are still man-made. It's still a manufactured ingredient that makes that oil solid at room temperature, that makes the food last longer on the shelves. It's still so processed, and I feel like we should still avoid anything that says hydrogenated oils in that ingredient list. Also, I feel like there's more to come on this because there's been so much focus on partially hydrogenated trans fats. We weren't really seeing fully hydrogenated until now, and who knows what that's going to lead to for our future health and health harms. It's not going to be good data, I will tell you. So that fully hydrogenated oil still has same negative health effects with impact on our heart health, our cholesterol, increasing that risk for heart disease, stroke, diabetes, etc. The other thing with that hydrogenated oil, again, the ingredient list now is not always saying if it is fully hydrogenated or partially, so we just don't know as consumers, unfortunately. So I personally feel like it's best to avoid all hydrogenated oils altogether for our health. So foods that you will find these hydrogenated oils, trans fats hiding in, again, they're going to be packaged processed foods, something that has a label, something that has a package that came out of a food factory. You'll more commonly find these in prepackaged or bakery, like cookies, cakes, pies. You'll also find them in like some breads, some wraps, tortilla shells. They're also found in refrigerated dough, like pizza dough, pie crust, things like that. I've also seen them in peanut butters as like an extra oil that's added to that peanut butter. You can also find them in popcorn, primarily like pre-pop popcorn in the big bags, or some microwave popcorns have them. Some pre-made frostings will have trans fats and hydrogenated oils, frozen pizzas, margarines, shortenings, and then a big culprit of this is deep fried foods. That frying process in general makes trans fats, and then sometimes they will use trans fats in that frying oil, so that way their oil lasts longer and they don't have to change it as often in that restaurant. So like we started talking about already, it is very important that we read that nutrition label, but especially paying close attention to that ingredient list. Ignore everything on the front of the package. They can put anything on there to help draw you to buy that package and use some tricky marketing and words to confuse you. But make sure that you're reading that ingredient list and avoiding everything that says partially hydrogenated oils. I, again, would also avoid anything that says hydrogenated oils in that ingredient list. So if it even says 0 grams trans fat on the label, make sure it's not in the ingredients as well. If there's less than ½ a gram per serving, they can round down and put 0 on their nutrition label. And who often eats 1 serving of a packaged food, right? So 2-3 servings can quickly add up to at least 1 gram, and it does not take much trans fat to be detrimental to our health. We want 0 grams of trans fat every day. So next we'll talk about some things that you can do to avoid trans fat and improve your health. So another thing that I love talking about is just eating real foods. So trying to avoid those packaged processed foods, foods with additives, extra chemicals, stabilizers, oils, things like that. And so like those fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, the food that Mother Nature gave us. And then lastly, if you want a treat, make it yourself. Make those treats with like real whole foods, flour, sugar, butter. That's going to be better for us than eating that food that's pre-manufactured with those oils for stabilizers, lasting longer on the shelf, things like that. So just make real food, make it at home. If you found this video helpful, make sure you like and share this video with someone who you care about. Also, don't forget to subscribe to follow along for some more tips on living healthier. That's going to be all for this video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.